Hi, welcome back. In the last part we got on with the modelling of our back handle here, so this portion, and in this part I want to talk about these tubes because these are quite fun to make and not as difficult as you might imagine if you've never done them before. So I'm going to actually make these tubes with a curve first of all, and then I'm going to extrude a NURB surface along it and finally convert it to a polygon. This has certain advantages that we'll cover as we go along. So first thing, we need to create some sort of NURBS curve. So in this case I'm going to use a Bezier curve. It works a little like the pen tool in Photoshop. Now it really wouldn't matter if you use the EP or CV curves, but I like the Bezier curve tool. I like the way it works. So it works by putting down points and then you can bend those points afterwards. Actually, you can bend them on the way through. I find it easier to bend them afterwards, but basically if you've used the pen tool in Photoshop, you'll pretty much get a grip on this. So we start by left mouse clicking to put down the first point, and then we want the second point, the third point, and the fourth point. So this has given us something that now doesn't look much like a curve. But if we go in and hold Control and left shift, and then come over the dot, hold the mouse button down, you'll see it gives me a curve handle. Just, very similar to the pen tool in Photoshop. So I can now just go around and curve these out until they kind of match the center of my curve point here. And if you just grab the point by itself, you can of course just move it around. You can also grab just one end of the handle, but in order to move it independently, if you hold Control down and grab one end, you can then move it independently. So it gives you a great deal of control over your curve. And for a simple curve like this, the EP or CV curve tools will be fine, but it doesn't hurt to have a bit more of a degree of control. And there we go. So once you finish your curve, press enter. Now if you're editing a Bezier curve and you press enter and you want those control handles back, if you just go to Control Vertex, this is not really going to give you the same amount of control. I mean, you can do it with a Control Vertex, but now I can't edit one side of this and it's not quite the same. So if you just select the curve itself before you select its Control Vertex and just go back up to Create Bezier Curve, this will bring in the original controls for the Bezier curve. So now I can click on this point, grab this one with Control, and I've got all that editing capacity back. So if you are working with one of these curves, you can just get back to it by going back to its Create Bezier Curve, and it will give you all the original kind of curve handles. So now I've got the curve that's in approximately the right shape. What we need is to get this tube along it, and to do that I'm going to use a NURBS curve, just a standard NURBS circle here, and that'll have been created down there, and I'll bring this into approximately the right position, and then I'm going to rotate it. I'm going to hold J to stagger that rotation. There we go. And I'm going to move this to the start of my curve. Now if I want it in the exact center of my curve, which this will probably be pretty close, but let's say I wanted to make doubly sure, I can select my circle here, select snap to curves, and then come in and grab the snapping point. Oops, I've snapped to a curve over there now. Come here, you. And I'm just going to snap this onto the curve, which can be sometimes a pain in the backside. There we go. So that's snapped it to the curve. I can't pull it any further back, and that's now right at the center of the curve. So yeah, I can just show you that that's spot on. All right. So make sure you untick your snap to curves, and now we need this circle to, let's make sure it's about the same size as this tube. It is. So we're going to take this circle and extrude it along this path. So select circle, select the in this case the Bezier curve, and go to Surfaces, Extrude. Okay, and that extrudes out our circle for us. So it's in approximately the same shape. If I press 3 to smooth it, as I would smooth this, you'll see that we're in approximately the right shape. Now you'll also notice that mine's extruded outwards as a polygon, so if I just delete that extrusion and select these again, I'll be able to show you a little bit about the extrusion menu. So surfaces, extrude, and I'll just reset that to its default. So by default it will extrude an output geometry of a NURBS curve. There you go, oh sorry, of a NURBS surface. So we can change that later on. You'll also notice that this is not in particularly a smooth extrusion. So we can select the curve, go to Edit Curves, and first I'll convert this to a standard curve. So modify, convert, Bezier curve to NURBS curve. Okay, and then I'm going to rebuild this curve so it has more control vertex, because if we look right now it has about 10, so let's give it some more to work with and then we can actually smooth it. So edit curves and let's rebuild the curve. Let's give it, say, 12 spans rebuild, and that's given us a much more curved shape. We don't have those jagged edges anymore. So then I can go to curve smooth even. Probably don't need to smooth this one, but if you want to, you could smooth that curve out a bit. For me, not necessary. Okay, so select this one, and let's extrude straight to a polygon. So surfaces, and let's go to extrude, pop open the menu. So output geometry, polygons, and I want quadded output geometry, and I want to extrude via, let's just try the standard fit to start with. Now this normally isn't the best one, but let's have a look. And in this case, the standard fit, I can see up here we've got some geometry that's not particularly pretty, but we could probably fix that. But you know, if you don't have to, let's go to extrude once again and try a different fit. So surfaces, extrude, and this time I'll just output to control points and extrude, and that's even worse. So that's not great for us. Nope. Okay, and you'll notice the surface of that was black, and in fact if I bring that back I'll be able to explain why. On the surface of this object, all of the faces have normals that point one way or another. You've seen how we've manipulated them to create harder edges. Well, if I look inside this tube, you'll see it's lit properly, and outside it's not. This is because all these normals are pointing inwards, and if you have your lighting turned on to two-sided lighting, you want to turn that off. It becomes easier to model two-sided light and turn off. It's very obvious when you've got normals that point the wrong way. So you just go normals, reverse, and you're back to where you should be. Anyway, let's find a nice way of doing this extrusion. So surfaces, extrude, and whenever you're extruding along a curve like this, or indeed whenever you convert in NURBS to polygons, you often have to play around with the options of the conversion to polys just to get the look you're going for. So a good one that normally works is to just go to count and quads, and this will say how many polygons we want created. So let's start off with less and try this. Okay, that will actually do it for us. When I smooth that now, nice and smooth, and because we're not putting hard edges on it, it's pretty much perfect. Now if we look at that compared to the reference, ours is a little bit thinner on the tubing, so that's a fairly easy fix. We just make our circle here a little bit bigger to start off with, and then just once again surfaces, extrude, and now we're more in line with the tube on the reference. You can of course now go into the vertex and grab a few verts and start pulling the tube. Whoops, let's grab a few of these and start pulling the tube exactly into shape as it was on the reference. Oops, missed the vertex. There we go. So as you can see, you can match this up to the reference pretty accurately. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that because, you know, I think the shape of this particular tubing is absolutely fine the way it is. So we managed to create a fairly low poly tube there in exactly the shape we wanted it in. So now we need to create these little kind of torus pieces, these pieces that go along, and it would be a complete pain in the backside to have to come up, create a polygon, say torus we'll use for this, and I'd need to get it into the correct position for a start, and then I'd need to alter that position all the way along the tube, duplicate it up, and it's going to be a bit of a pain. So we've got a trick for this. Get your torus into the right shape, and I'm just going to rotate mine 90 degrees upwards again, and I'll make sure it's about the right size, so we know we want it to sort of look like so. So let's come in, and if I go under its channel box torus, I can change its radius to say 0.1, and that will create a much thinner torus. And I want it to go along this pipe. So first things first, I'm going to snap it to the end of this curve so it starts in the same place as this circle. So I'm just going to go up here and hit snap to curves. And to make this easier, I'm going to select the curve and the torus and go up to show, isolate selected, view selected. This will make it, this will make it very easy to snap this to the curve. Okay, and that's snapped to the end of the curve. I couldn't move it any further. I know it's perfectly in the center of the curve. So then I can just go up to isolate selected, view selected, and we'll know that that's right in the middle of where this curve is. Now, we looked at, before I go any further into showing you how to replicate this up along here, I just wanted to say one other thing. We looked at changing the shape of this by quickly pulling the vertices. We can also select the curve itself, go to the curves control vertex and edit those. Whoops, they're on snap to curve. That will also change the shape of the polygon pipe as well. Very handy. Okay. Just so you know, you don't have to then simply use the vertex on the poly object to manipulate it. You can use the curve. Alright, so now we've got this torus here, and we want to basically duplicate it up along here without going through all that trouble of kind of moving it about and duplicating it manually. So the thing to do is create a motion path that this torus will follow. So I need to select the curve itself, select the torus. I then need to come up and go to animate, so I'm going to use the marking menu, so just spacebar, animate, motion path, attach to motion path. But I don't want it to go for 120 frames. I don't want to be creating 120 objects. So I should be able to input a start time and an end time and just say 12. I want 12 of these things. I think there's 10 on the original. We can actually check it in the reference. Yeah, there's 10 on the original. So I'm going to do 12 because one will be at this end and one will be at that end. So I'll probably have the required 10 along. So I'm going to just hit attach. Okay, and you'll see that's kind of straightened up a bit. It's attached to the motion path. I'll change my frame range down here to 12, and you'll see that that's created 12 copies of this object all the way along our curve. Now, they're not perfectly placed in some instances, and some of that would be to do with us moving those vertices before we did this, but they're pretty close. It makes it a lot easier to edit. But now I need to tell Maya that I like it to create these as geometry and not just this animation. So that's not too difficult either. I can go to animate again and create an animation snapshot. So let's just check out the options for this. Start frame, end frame, okay, 12, snapshot. And there you go. You'll see I've just created 12 of these all the way along the pipe. Okay, so I don't actually need this original object anymore. Now I can come up and I can smooth these, which will make them shrink a bit. And then any final placement that needs to be done can now be done by hand. But, and we're going to have to center the pivot, so modify center pivot. Any final small kind of interposition tweaks that can be done can be done very easily. Okay, as opposed to trying to do all that by hand, we now have a lot less work to do. And this one might need to be a little smaller because our pipe is not completely uniform. So there you go, basically. Quite simple if you use a curve. And you know, all you have to remember for this is to get the geometry out. We extruded along the curve, and then to get these multiple kind of rings, we just used a motion path to attach a piece of geometry to, and then from that motion path we created an animation snapshot, which will work in pretty much any circumstance when you need to do something like this. So I'm going to be back in the next part and we'll look at creating the rest of this back piece and possibly starting on the main claw. And in between the parts, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of just move these about a bit, just to get it into a position that I'm happier with. But as I said, doing it this way means you get the required number of copies in approximately the right place, makes the whole thing a little bit easier to place, really. So I hope you found something in here helpful, and I will see you in the next part. Thanks for watching.